Okay, perfect, I do too. Okay. Excuse me. That garlicky pickle is delicious.
The cinnamon thing, see how it got. Tongue is spicy.
Do you want a cinnamon candy?
You know,
Since you're sitting between the two of us?
since they're, well, maybe I'll try one, can't hurt.
Keep your wrapper.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Town of Yountville special meeting. And I would like to call it to order at 1 p.m. today. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Reeves? Here. Councilmember Tripp?
Here.
Councilmember Knight?
Here.
Vice Mayor McKee? Here. Mayor Moeller?
Here. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda for our special meeting today?
I move adoption.
I'll second.
I move adoption of the special meeting agenda.
I will second again.
All right, and we're going to use our buttons, Hillary.
Go ahead and do a voice vote, please.
Voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? That passes unanimously. Now I'd like to invite anybody who has a public comment that is not on the agenda for our special meeting today to come up and give us your name, if you'd like. Seeing no movement, I will go ahead and move along to what we're calling our green study session. And this is going to be divided into 3 different segments. I'm going to try to keep each segment to about 30 minutes. And because we have another meeting at 3 o'clock, and that allows for a little overrun and some questions. So, and I'm going to let our town manager, Brad Ralston, be our host today for this.
Well, thank you, Mayor. And thanks to the public for joining us here today. We do have 3 subjects, starting with single-use plastics, foodware. We will give a short presentation, kind of talk about the background and what options there are moving forward, answer any clarifying questions from the council, and then we'll take public comment, and then discussion and direction. There's no formal decisions being made today. The intent of a study session is to have a open dialogue with the council and the community so that we can come back with any specific action that would be taken during a regular meeting. So again, today's just discussion and direction based on what we hear from everyone in the room. The second item, and you're welcome to leave after the plastics if that's what you're here for, will be the discussion of the regional climate action and adaptation plan that's being discussed at the regional level, at the county level. So we'll similar process. Aaron Heacock, our planning director, will take the lead on that one. Take public comment, discussion direction, and then we'll move on to the tree ordinance. We have our town arborist, Tony Walcott, who's here with us. And so, you know, something we started last year, we're just in essence trying to pick it back up, and we can make sure we're on the right track. And that'll be the third subject, and then anything else you all want to talk about. For the public's information, I think it was almost 2 years ago, we established this idea of Yountville Green. We added Yountville Blue and Yountville Ready as kind of a Venn diagram where Yountville Green is environmental initiatives, Yountville Blue was health initiatives, and Yountville Ready was readiness or emergency preparedness. So we've been doing study sessions on those sort of 3 subjects intermittently, but this tonight is focused on green. So these are the 3 subjects that I outlined. So who's working the... I will try to do my best to introduce the plastics foodware ordinance. Do you have it, Hillary? And Hillary Gady, our town clerk communications director, has also been helpful now that she is returned. She's been helpful with all the Yountville Green stuff. So We created, and I know this is in the staff report, I think, I can't remember if this is in a slide, but we created an ad hoc committee of council members, Tripp and Reeves, almost a year ago, I think, and with the intent of talking about single-use plastics in foodware. And we have had that conversation. I know that the ad hoc committee has come to the chamber, and Whitney helped facilitate a conversation with, I think, many of you that are here today. The important thing to understand is an ad hoc committee, which is 2 members of council, can go and do things without the rest of the council as a way of trying to make things more efficient in terms of getting communication back and forth. There's no power to make decisions, so forth. That's why we're coming back to the full council today. So even though all that information was put out there, I want you to know that in a lot of cases, the other 3 council members are hearing this for the first time today. So feel free to repeat yourself or make sure you're making the same points, because the full council is ultimately who makes the decision and directs myself and the staff. As is said here in the introduction, this is really a global issue, but the state has taken a significant position in terms of, if you're familiar with Senate Bill 54, this was kind of a landmark legislation that Senator Newsom signed a few years ago. He has just, if you read the article, sort of decided that the Business Roundtable and other interest groups need to go back and look at it from a feasibility standpoint. And so, not sure where the state is going, but we always do have to sort of follow what's happening at the in Sacramento and do our best, the regional and local level to implement things. We are exploring these policy options to align to that broader regulatory process, but I do think there's always sort of local issues that need to be discussed at a local level. So really, we have to comply with state, sometimes county, depending, but this is a discussion of what do we want to do at the local level. So next slide. Several jurisdictions in Napa have adopted local ordinances. City of Napa started it with the, how am I doing this? We all dealt with the grocery bags. That seemed to be the first thing that we all talked about for a while. That got adopted. The Napa County, took it a little further. And then the City of Calistoga, I think that was 2 years ago, I want to say, maybe just less than 2 years ago, had a more comprehensive ordinance that got into styrofoam and other things. And, I think that was being used as a reference, like the Calistoga ordinance I know has come up a lot. And I do also know the county is pushing different things. So I'm not fully aware of all the different initiatives. But I do think what we're talking about, again, is here locally. And, we're committed, of course, to, sustainable practices. And we all, within reasonable standards, want to make sure that we're being eco-friendly and so forth. I also think 2 words I've been using a lot, at least with the ad hoc committee, and we also have our town attorney, Gary Bell, who's been helpful in shaping this, is the idea of what are things that we want to enforce versus things that we want to encourage. And I think, obviously, when you get into enforcement, you have a whole staffing question of who does it and all of those things. Versus, in some cases, encouraging things, which may or may not work, depending on your businesses, but we're all trying. And I think those are 2 categories that maybe help us frame the conversation today. Because, again, ultimately, if we adopt an ordinance, the point is the town should be enforcing it, and I think that's always a question of, what is it, staffing levels, et cetera. So the final slide really looks at 3 options. Move forward with the proposed local ordinance. There was an ordinance drafted. We didn't include it in the packet. I feel like that's been discussed. We can discuss specifics at a regular council meeting if we want to bring that forward. We can talk about modifying the proposed ordinance, get into things, carrot, sticks, encourage, enforce, et cetera. Or 3, we can just pause and wait for implementation of state legislation so we know what the state guidelines are and we can try to follow suit. So there may be other options, but I just wanted to lay those 3 out so that we could have a conversation and hopefully get direction on what we want to do next. So with that, I can take clarifying questions from the council before you receive public comment.
All right, great. Any questions from the council? No one's shaking their heads so on the positive. So I'll just, can we want to take public comment and then we can go from there? All right, so now I will invite anybody from the public who wants to come up, depending on how things go. Since this is an informal session, we can always come back and circle back to public comment too. There's not really a formality in a study session for that. So if anybody would like to make any.
John can bring you the mic, or you can come to the mic, whatever you're more comfortable with.
Yeah, just state your name would be great.
And your business.
And Councilmember McKee would like to know your business if you have if you're representing a business. So we may not know all of you.
I think I'll start since I asked everybody to be here today. So I'm Whitney Diver McAvoy, President and CEO of the Yountville Chamber of Commerce. Vice Mayor, for your records. Today, representing our business community, we have RH Yountville, The Kitchen at Priest Ranch, Ranch Market 2, Bottega and Otomo, Thomas Keller Restaurant Group, and Bartisono. So that's everybody that's here today. So I think I wasn't sure if we were going to kind of see the components of the ordinance, but I think kind of summarizing our last conversation that we had with the 2x2, it was a very good dialogue with our businesses and with our council members. And thank you again for putting together the slideshow and for being there. I thought it was really great. I think there are a bunch of different concerns around the feasibility of implementing some of the suggestions in the ordinance, including if there are actually compostable products that comply with Upper Valley disposal and their regulations as it relates to their organic composting. So I know there are a lot of questions about that and if those materials are actually available. I know a second point that was made also was how long that businesses would have to phase this in and what does that look like? Is that a 3, 6 month, 1 year process? And then also around the single-use plastic water bottles. As we know, Ranch Market here is an affordable option for many of our farm workers and other members of our community. The cost of providing, and I'm sure Eric will speak to this as well, glass or aluminum water bottles is severely more expensive than plastic. And I know he has those figures that he can share with you. So how does that impact both his customers, but also his ability to do business in Yountville? And as well as what does that look like for our other businesses in town, perhaps our hotels as well, who provide water bottles for their guests. So there was that, and then also the 3 bins, as we like to call them, and the signage for the 3 bins. And of course, I'm talking about trash, recycling, and compost. We all know that is very confusing. We all struggle that when we go to the Oxbow or other events. And what does that look like? What does that signage look like? Where those bins need to be placed? Are those in public spaces only? Are they in hotel rooms? The room and the bathroom, etc. So there was some clarification looking for that as well, and how does that all work? So hopefully I didn't miss anything, Councilmember Reeves and Tripp, from our meeting, but hopefully I got it all, and I'm sure we'll hear from the businesses as well and how this would impact them from a cost perspective, but also serving their guests and how we educate those guests as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Whitney. And I should have mentioned, and I'm sorry for not mentioning, the key points to the summary, or the summary of key points that was attached to the staff report. And if we do need to bring that up, I think, Hillary, you can probably put that on the screen. I think that's what you were referring to, Whitney. And the categories in there, if you hadn't seen it, are single-use carry-out bags, waste containers, reusable and compostable foodware, and then single-use or styrofoam foodware, and then finally single-use water bottles. And there are bulleted summaries. This was, I think, the attorney's attempt to summarize what was, in essence, a fairly complicated ordinance. So if there are specific issues based on these key points, that would be useful, I think, for us to hear those today. And I should have mentioned that before. So you can keep taking public comment, but if you needed to refer to that, it's now up on the screen.
You're welcome to go to the microphone, or I can hand this works there. Okay. Thank you. Eric Housley, Ranch Market 2. Thank you guys for doing this. And Hillary and Pam, I know, reached out. And I feel like you guys actually, I assume the council knew, obviously you guys were working on it. So I feel like we do feel heard in the process. So we at least appreciate the process at this point. Some of the clarifications would be, I know we did discuss on Councilmember Tripp came to the store and looked at kind of where Upper Valley was doing things with us. For example, like we use the compostable product. It's the plastic. We understand that there is a plastic in there, a microplastic of some sort. But we're just still trying to make things the most feasible possible without, running costs up even more, not only to ourselves, but then to the customer base as well. So I think that would be some clarifications on the compostable options. I know there are a lot of, when it says commercially compostable only, and I think they heard my message when we were in there, is it's not my problem that Upper Valley can't do commercially compostable, but the rest of the world can. Whether it's perfect or not, how can we make the best scenario possible? Because I think we're all in the room because we all believe it's the right thing to do. How can we do this together as a community? So again, thank you for the time and hearing us out. Happy to answer other questions on our side. I think we went over all that stuff before. So,
Eric, can you speak a little bit to the plastic water bottles, which are kind of a big focus for us? That you mentioned the cost, and I think we talked about this when I was visiting, as relates to like trying to get people to try canned water or boxed water or something else, because that is a concern, or just something that concerns me, the impact of the cost.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, so there's box water, which comes in a Tetra Pak, which is ironic to me because it doesn't really seem like that's more feasible, yet it's not a bottle of water. The hard part for me to wrap my head around this is not that it's, again, the right thing to do, but if we tackle the water side of the industry, which I say is about 45 to 50% of my total sales, water versus all other beverage in terms of non-alcoholic beverage, if that makes sense. But then you've got Coca-Cola, so we're going to ban all 20-ounce Coca-Cola, 1 liter Coca-Cola, because again, that's all plastic too, right? So, and I know the answer is no now, but why shouldn't we be if it's plastics? Then, so I think it's, like the way we're targeting it. The difficulty that I see is when I watch the consumers, and I think I mentioned it to both council members, Tripp and Reeves. I was putting you guys together. I'm sorry about that. Was, even when I go to GOTS, they're doing the right thing by having it out there. And I watch people every single time. They walk up, they look at all the pictures, and then they finally just go, shrug their shoulders and dump it all in one, right? So I think having 3 units in front of Ranch Market, we're just going to have to sort it because at this point it's a mess. And good luck having my staff sort it. We're good to get them to work. So I think ultimately there is a frustration there. The cost, to answer your question, on the aluminum is approximately 4 times more right now. I bought a glass bottle of water the other day, a glass bottle of water that was $7. So I'm like, we also don't want to be alienating to every customer walking in. Let's be honest, there's plenty of people in this room that already I'll use the proper word and say complain rather than the B word about the pricing at Ranch Market. We're a small store. Now, by the way, let's take away things that are affordable for the average customer and push that up. Again, right thing to do. How do we find that? And that's for all of them. I know Dan and I have spoken extensively from the Velo Deli as well. We believe it's the right thing. We're just trying to find something that fits, and I don't want an exception for Ranch Market for the rest of the community. I think we need to have it where we can all fit under the same thing. So.
Thank you.
I just wanted to kind of address some of your comments about the sorting. So a couple comments about that. Most of anything I know in our the sample ordinances I saw, we talked about brown, but and a lot of our garbage cans still are brown, but the state standard is going to gray. So we'll just go brown/gray for now. So anything that goes into the brown/gray, which goes straight to the landfill, is typically, it's not sorted at all. That's really garbage. And the other issue is the recycling. And a lot of I think people are doing a great job, especially throughout the valley, Upper Valley, where we get to see all the metrics. But the big problem that everyone is still having is our recycled in the blue can is contamination. So, you might have something, you've really stared at this, you've looked at all the little symbols, you've thought about it, it's like this goes in the blue, but it's got food waste on it. So you didn't think about that, but that's the contamination. So actually, that would go in the green. So, because then that can be turned into organics. So I totally agree that it is confusing, but I think it's, we're just going to have to do more demonstrations, maybe have some little quizzes, to actually get there, because we're doing such a great job already. And I think it's really that contamination piece that's I find a little challenging still for everybody, and the problems that we're kind of seeing. So, I do think they're doable, but and maybe we need better pictures, or I'm not really sure. But that was all from SB 1383. We did a long rollout, a lot of education, and so we're still not there yet, but I can tell you there's a lot less going into the landfill on a tonnage basis than there was just a couple of years ago. Very significant. So people who have figured that out, thank you for that. And then in terms of, Brad briefly mentioned SB 54, what I've sat on the Environmental Quality Committee for California League of Cities for 14 years or something, and it took a long time we talked about this subject a lot. And so what the state law says is that this is really hard for all of us to kind of solve for a lot of the reasons that Eric brought up. So what the state has decided is it has to come from the manufacturers of the plastics. And so once we can get them to actually come up with, things that are recyclable, so you actually can buy something and replace the bad plastics, which everyone is working on, all the big distributors. That's going to take some time, and they're coming now. They're trying to develop those things, and there's some hiccups, and so they're reevaluating that. So, but that is coming, and I think that is really going to help solve a lot of this, and that way you won't really need a lot of the enforcement because it won't be coming into California. So I just wanted to give you that little background. So let's hear some more comments. We listen to you guys, so you're all here. So we don't want to make any decisions in a vacuum. So, all right. Well, I'm going to. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Hi, thank you for this discussion. My name is Alex. I help manage the Thomas Keller Restaurant Group and our casual concept specifically. One comment I have on this would just be to maybe make as much clarity available as possible on timeline and those specific guidances, because we do operate restaurants and businesses across the United States, across multiple different needs and markets, and we do offer, I think, mostly everything that complies already, but we do work with a company out in New York who handles a lot of our custom logo products. All that would require a pretty long lead time in order to kind of shift that from one direction to another. On average, we try to keep about 6 months worth of inventory, and redesigning those products is quite laborious and requires, as you can imagine, a lot of input from a lot of different stakeholders in our company. So just a reminder to maybe consider that not every company is ordering generic products and putting a sticker on them, but these custom logoed items really require quite a long lead time for us to make that change, and represent a significant amount of value that's already been invested in these items. So, if you could try and make that as clear as possible ahead of time, we'd love to continue to push that forward and comply and seek alternatives that hopefully result in a better result for Upper Valley as well as for our community. And I think everybody in this room is interested in the same thing. I would also say we have to maybe look at, as businesses, ways that we customize these products, right? I do take out quite a lot, and you see these obviously non-compostable plastic-based stickers that get put on everything from stickers to ribbons to bows to all these other accessory parts to our compostable containers that probably goes in the landfill. But sometimes, to Eric's point, confuses people when they're at GOTS or when they're at another location as to whether or not everything that they're holding in their hand can go into one particular waste bin, right? I think that's always the trick is, all right, can I put this compostable item that maybe has a non-compostable liner or a non-compostable sticker into the same bin, right? So by combining these items, we really create a lot of confusion for the consumers. And so that guidance might be really helpful for businesses as they design their products for the upcoming year here in Yountville. That was my thoughts. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Hi, I'm Margene. It's been a while since I've observed this because I haven't been walking early in the morning in our community park. But on multiple occasions in the past, I have observed our town employee taking from the recycle bin and putting it together with the garbage. It's like, wait a second, we worked really hard to separate those initially. And a couple of times I did comment to this gentleman, and he said, oh, well, there isn't very much. So I hope that isn't happening anymore. I don't know, but there's lots of levels to this.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily Farka from Estate Yountville. I want to just make a comment regarding the plastic bottled waters. We do want to make an effort to change this, but we have discussed internally using the carton boxes, the aluminum, and obviously that's a huge cost impact for us. And the option of the refillables, which I think is great, and a lot of places do it, are tied to issues with the water. So if we're going to have water stations change filters every 3 or 6 months because the water is contaminated, then that's something that we have to consider. And what would I give my guests when the water is contaminated? I will have to buy plastic bottles to resolve the issue. So we just need a commitment from everybody as well on this. If we want to decide to have options of refilling bottles around town and in hotels and restaurants, we just need to make sure that we are all clear that if the water gets contaminated, then we might have like a week or 2 weeks that we will not be able to use them.
All right, thank you.
Hi, David O'Malley from Grupo Chiarello, Bottega in Otimo. Been in the business a long time, obviously, and restaurants have always wanted to be on the forefront of this. I mean, I remember Judy Rogers, the chef owner of Zuni Cafe, getting rid of plastic straws before anyone in the country got rid of plastic straws. We just need to know what the guidelines are. And if you tell us and give us the timeline, as we talk about, because we are using generic to-go containers, the plastic, and we buy a lot of them. And so we just need to know if what's going to be in, and I have a show and tell, and I'm trying to figure out, do I have to hold these up and you guys tell me yes or no on some of these items? Because that's what we need to know moving forward. We go to, I think a lot of us use bamboo picks. We use paper straws or something like that. We use paper bags. We need to know the guidelines. And it's not like we have a lot of them. We use bamboo silverware in the right containers. What is it going to be? That's what we need to know, and give us a timeline. And can I pull these out and you're going to tell me this is going to be a yes or a no?
Hi, I'm Janet. In response to that last comment, it would be nice if there was some sort of an intermediary between what's going on as far as law or what we're proposing in town that we want that helps with the businesses. And I know the chamber in that respect picks that up, but also to give ideas of new, for instance, plastic, not using plastic take-home containers, to be able to use cardboard or something that's compostable. In that when I go to restaurants, which I do a lot, the companies that are forward thinkers, it's really impressive to people, and I think most Californians are aware of this. So
we've used cardboard. Now we're using these.
Please, so the audience.
Okay, so we've used cardboard. Now we're using these. No problem. Are we going to change? Let us know. Okay? And yes, are we always searching for a better product? We are, because we're trying to be on the forefront of everything. And we are members of this community, and we want to do the right thing. But that's where we stand, is to know, just tell us what the guidelines are and give us enough timeline.
Why did you switch from cardboard?
Because these actually are much better for the guests, because the cardboard is sloppy. It doesn't hold things as well. Clear plastic lids, as everyone can see. You know what's in each and every one of them. We write on it with a Sharpie on top what the item is in this thing, so they see it. And it's much better than a cardboard thing, which ends up being really sloppy.
Sir, can you look at the bottom of that? Can you see the number on that? There's certain plastics, don't quote me, I think they're 2s and 5s that can go.
2 5s up at Upper Valley.
Ones and twos. Thank you. So, yeah, so 1s and 2s. Is that a 1 or a 2?
No.
It's a 5?
It's a 5.
Can you see a number on it?
No.
Some of them, yeah, they just have the symbol.
This one's a 5.
That's a 5, okay.
So
All right.
what are you referring to when you say we don't do 5, we do 1 or 2? Please elaborate.
So according to the Upper Valley Disposal people, they have a buyer for 1s and 2s, and it is somewhat more recyclable. Anything other than 1 and 2 is difficult, if not impossible, to recycle, and usually goes to landfill. Sometimes they indicate that there's a place in Houston, Texas, that takes these things, but upon further research, you might know that there's a huge parking lot storage facility full of number 5 plastic that is not being recycled. It's just being stored there. So that if we can prevent getting those numbers, then we lessen the number of plastic items that are leaching and not being recycled.
And so 1s and 2s are great, but if there's food left on it and you put it in the recycler, you've just contaminated all the other recycling. So that's the other challenge.
I did talk to Upper Valley about the food contamination, and they indicated that if you dump the organic material into the compost bin, you can recycle the tin or the paper holder of your food item in the recycle. They are only really concerned about whole sandwiches or the rest of your salad that you didn't eat. If you put that in the compost bin and there's still dressing or a few pieces of lettuce in there, it's considered okay. So I think the whole idea is that if you're going to recycle an item, it goes through a water station, and they clean off some of that stuff before they actually reuse the material. So I think it's okay for us as users to scrape it into the compost and recycle the item that is recyclable. And I really appreciate the request for specificity from the businesses, because I think it is important that we know exactly what is recyclable and what is not, and the fact that this ordinance is well, the draft idea of an ordinance is aimed at not using plastic, because plastic is a health issue as well as a pollution issue. So I think our main concern was the water bottles, because they are ubiquitous in the landscape of tossing out of car windows and just not knowing what to do with them. And then the idea of plastic utensils and plastic containers, they're so convenient, yet they are so damaging to the environment. We have options, and I think the idea of education, both of the users and of the businesses, to know which containers are the best to use or that comply with an ordinance, that's a tantamount responsibility on our part, making sure that we provide the information that's needed for you to be able to comply, and listing options that you can use in the transition. And ultimately, the goal is to try not to use any plastic, because any plastic is bad for the environment. And when we look at commercially compostable items, they contain a plasticizer. Whether it says bioplastic or not, it is plastic. And when it degrades, there's microplastic. So we want to avoid using those things and go straight for something that is actually compostable, which would be cardboard or bamboo as a utensil. And those are the kinds of things that you bring up. The cost would need to be worked with, and the timeline should also be clarified. And I think as an ad hoc committee, we heard your concern for the timeline, and I had thought that originally it would be easy because our businesses are so on board, but I understand the transition part and would definitely work for a longer timeline for implementation. But I think the overall thing that I learned from interacting with the businesses is that education of both the businesses and our residents in general is an important issue that we need to address as a town. So I have other ideas, but I also wanted to remind everybody that in 2016, the town did pass a climate action plan, and in that climate action plan, there is a call for encouraging the discontinuation of the use of plastic. So it's been 9 years since that encouragement came out, and there have been some strides, and we appreciate those strides. But at this point, the dial has moved, and we need to make another stride. And I feel like we need to provide the guidelines and the encouragement, and hopefully the kind of acknowledgement that I heard from businesses about the issue of plastic will be the enforcement. So that's my observations.
We have more comments? Yes.
Good afternoon. Alan Nagelawa with Bardessono and Hotel Yountville. Thank you for the opportunity. I just want to echo that we all do want to do the right thing. I appreciate the clarity on getting more of a timeline, because that's I think one of the top concerns for the businesses. We all want to do the right thing. Bardessono converted to aluminum water bottles this year at a significant cost increase, and we're looking to do the same at some point this year at Hotel Yountville. I think education is also something that we need to do, the signage for sure. But my one question is, where's Upper Valley on this? What are they going to do as the partner in waste management? It's obviously a very critical service, a needed service. We all pay a significant amount of money. Just my 2 hotels on a monthly basis is pretty up there. So what are they doing? What are they going to do? What actions are they going to take to support this very worthwhile initiative? Thank you.
Hello, Alex again from Thomas Keller Restaurants. Thank you for the fantastic comments. That very much speaks to my concerns as well. I think what we're really missing is that coordination. When we started the composting program with Upper Valley, it was a nightmare of crisscrossing needs on their part and our ability to meet those needs, and then our ability to even find the operational efficiencies to get that done. I mean, just I believe it was Ms. Tripp, you mentioned scraping items out of recyclable containers into compostable containers, into compostable bins. That wet garbage in and of itself is a huge logistical nightmare. I don't know if you've ever had to try and lift a even half full compostable bag, commercial sized bag, out of a Slim Jim or a large scale, brute trash can. But it can weigh upwards of 75, 80 pounds if it's really full, which is nearly impossible to get out. There's weight restrictions on the 4-yard containers that Upper Valley will take as well. So they won't take it if you don't have at least a quart of it filled with dry yard waste. There's all kinds of bizarre regulations with Upper Valley. I think what we've been missing is that coordination. We're missing the coordination of approved suggested items that the town of Yountville wants to see in its waste streams, so that we can work with our suppliers so that they understand what's being brought into Yountville is sufficiently compostable or reusable or recyclable. And then I think we need an avenue. It might help to have some sort of liaison here in an office setting where we can go and either ask for clarification, right? Bringing specific examples, at least through this transition period, because I think it will be really tricky as we all try and find the right answer and do the right thing. I understand cost is a huge factor in this as well. We may have to add some sort of component of communication to our guests because we're going to feel that. We already feel that, right? Everybody in Yountville who comes to our restaurants, who maybe hasn't visited in a while, shows some form of sticker shock. We hear it on a weekly basis on how expensive everything in Yountville is. And I'm worried that if we continue to lean into that without a coordinated effort, as in help from Upper Valley, right? What their commitment is going to be to this, our communication as a town to our guests, so that they understand why we're doing it and what we're doing, and then third, the list of items that we can bring on, so that it outlives just one person's time at a restaurant group or at a hotel group here, or any business. We understand the difficulty of constantly retraining new managers, new hiring managers, new purchasing managers or purchasing officers within these companies. It is a huge, huge task, and there's not a lot of available materials out there that we can feel confident in, right? And I think that's what businesses are always looking for, is confidence and security that the decisions we make now are still going to be applicable in 12 months and are still going to pay off really in 12 months. So that clarity, I think, would be germane to what we're trying to accomplish here, so that we can make the best decisions, right? Because is it better to have a number one recyclable item or a non-compostable item because of the lining that nobody can see really? And what's the most viable for these products? It's not easy to put hot items in an unlined container. It doesn't last very long. And I believe, to Brad's point in the message that he wrote last time, there are no current examples of hot cups that don't have these liners. So there are actual exceptions. At the bakery, we use I believe they're Perricone Farms lemonades and orange juices for those really high-end, cold processed, unadulterated juices, they don't put them in glass. They only put them in plastic. So there are going to be a list of exemptions, I think, that are going to need to be fleshed out, and that maybe, again, to my point earlier, we need a liaison here in town during this transition period to help create that list of exemptions, or at least create the clarity before businesses go and remake their menus or redesign their packaging. Thank you.
Hi, it's Margene again. I went to some talk here at the community center from an Up Valley waste person, and I almost positive she explained that in recycling plastic, we can do it only so many times. And by the time it gets to black, I love those containers, black, they can't do anything with it, is what I remember her saying, that it has to go into the garbage. So I think that needs to be considered.
Last chance. We'd love to hear from you. I think it's all this input is very great for us to hear.
Daniel Cerro, Bello Deli and Pizzeria, Yountville Deli. I need to speak to, or I'd like to speak to, just the costs. I'm on board for trying to, use as compostable products as we can. But for a business like mine, we cater to the workers, the field workers. I don't have the ability to tweak costs much more. A $17 sandwich for someone that works in a winery or works in the field is out of bounds, and we're already pushing that. So I think we just need to consider what resources we have to either help business or mitigate some of these costs. And I also like to echo that Upper Valley needs to be on board. My experience dealing with them in the past has been kind of like a shell game, trying to get the straight answers out of them as far as what we need from them to deal with putting things in containers correctly as far as transitioning. So anything that they can do or we can do to coordinate with them to get a clear picture before we go into this would be great.
One of the things that I think was important, I know I have El Posto as well in Napa, is when they were reaching out, is these containers for the to-go containers, like the cardboard version doesn't work. I mean, imagine taking the paper straw, shoving it in your Frappuccino, your lemonade, or whatever you're drinking, and then take it home 20 minutes later and tell me how good it works, right? I mean, there's a point where we need to do what's right, and then there's a point where we need to make strides in the right direction. And I think, unfortunately, we don't have the industries in the country around us to make the full, jump completely. And, example, French's mustard, mayonnaise containers, packets, frozen food, everything in produce sections now are prepackaged very commonly. So there's so many factors that I think we need to make some strides. So I think maybe this should be an incremental, hey, let's try to do X by this date, and then let's try to continue as we see changes in the state, and hopefully these things are not coming. It's still in my head. I'm like, the thought that I can go and buy a 20-ounce Coca-Cola, but I can't buy a Crystal Geyser, and they're both in plastic, and we're saying, well, they're 1s and 2s, but not 5s. Upper Valley, from the beginning, has always been an issue where this is about, I just heard it, somebody said it, is they can't sell it to someone else. That means they're making money off of it. We're not making money off of this. This is our cost. So somewhere they have to find a way to do it. One of the ideas that I said was, if we find something, and I think I might have mentioned it to Councilmember Reeves, was if we find a package that works for to-go containers, maybe the town finds a place to say, hey, we'll set up some storage and have the ability to get it so that's the same item being used around town. So those pictures go to here's the one compostable container that's going around that we're all using, and let's make this as simple as possible. But until we get there, we need to see those kind of strides. I don't disagree. If the 5s aren't working because they're at that point, then let's definitely make the strides to say, let's not use those. But I imagine Dan, who sells a lot of salads in the deli, not as many to me as I probably should be eating, but they're in a clear container, the marketing and the way that they can, put that out there is just very different, and it really shows differently than sticking it in a box. You can't see it. People want to see what they're eating. They want to see the freshness. So those would just be things that I think on our side that we need to hold Upper Valley more accountable when they're worried about what they can and can't sell, because that's revenue, whether it's cash flow or however they're looking at it, back to themselves. That's not our problem. Our problem is how do we make this better for our community and for our world.
All right. Thank you. Any last comments before we move on to our second of three items?
I can try to wrap up.
Okay, thanks.
And then...
you want to hear from the council a little?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I just want to summarize what we heard and hopefully, back, we have a bunch of detail, but back to this, I mean, I think what we're hearing is basically number two in terms of how do we deal with the transition, both the cost and the timing, right? And I think the certainty is obviously what the businesses are looking for at the end of the day, but cost is a huge factor, and obviously quality of product is even bigger than that in terms of making sure whatever product you have is marketable and is at the Yountville level, which I understand all of the points that have been made today by the businesses. I think the challenge, again, gets into, I wrote down a lot of words which were like, liaison, coordinated effort, education, all of these words that get thrown around. Like, who's doing that? Is this the town's job to coordinate with Upper Valley Waste, to explain it, to get into enforcement? You get into a lot of complicated questions when you get into who's actually going to do the work. And I think we have to sort that out, because I don't want to bring an ordinance back to council that we feel like we can't enforce or we can't encourage or we can't, let's say, collaborate with, because in many cases this is not our role. I looked at John Ferns in Public Works to manage our waste stream. But that's our waste stream. Your businesses all have to work with Upper Valley Waste, and you all have different programs, and we have to be, as a town, leading. And I think one of the great things about Yountville, we have to admit, is we are very eco-conscious. We are very sort of green-minded, and I think that's clear right when I got here. There's areas that are not, and it's sort of sad, but we're starting with a high bar, so I want us to all sort of recognize that we're up there. And like, how do we get to the next level is the debate or the discussion. And I feel like we can come back, based on what we heard. I can work with all five of you, because when we get into the details of the ordinance, this is where it gets really difficult, right? The ones and the twos versus the fives versus the, all of the, we had the summary of the key points. I think the ordinance was like 10 pages long? It's a long ordinance, and trying to explain how that translates to your business is brain damage. So I don't want to try to do it. I just want to try to have a reasonable timeline, because that's the main thing I've heard. If people need time to adapt, and then you factor in the cost and the quality issues, which I think are key. And you just can't, like you said, send I would never want to eat Bottega's ravioli in a cardboard box an hour later. The thing would turn to mush, right? So those are factors that I hear, and I do think we can get somewhere. But I will start with encouraging everyone to do what you think's right, because I think people are doing that, and I think that's where those stories come out through this. Then I think we can all hopefully appreciate the bar we're at, and then we can look at the state. What is the state really trying to do now that they're back to the drawing board? Unfortunately, I'm not going to have Aaron Heacock, our planning director, dive into that pond, because it's a vast ocean of conversations that are going on at the state level. If you stick around for the Regional Climate Action Plan, which you don't have to, you'll see kind of the pond I'm asking Aaron to dive into, because that is relevant to our Climate Action Plan. It does talk about, as you pointed out in 2016, we made an aspirational claim to discontinue the use of plastics. I think we all sort of aspire to that. It's just the transition is really complicated. So I will do my part in terms of trying to get a modified ordinance in front of this body to, and I know Gary and his firm, who represent other jurisdictions, are also hearing this issue from different points of view. So I think I understand Yountville. I do appreciate all the businesses that showed up and spoke. I think I see a lot of you in every day. So, and I know with Whitney transitioning out, I do view the chamber as an important liaison or an important partner in sort of sorting through, what the different interests are. But it is nice to have that high bar. It's also nice to have people that are here that are trying to be part of the solution. I think that's useful versus, what I call triangular conversations where people are trying to influence you through me, and all of these things become unwieldy. So,
well, one of the things, before you bring back another modified ordinance to us, I think this kind of a public forum, or maybe with the chamber, which the ad hoc group did, reviewing that and getting some more input before it comes up, maybe another interim step. I think I would find that useful.
Clearly, yeah, we can. I don't want to give you a clear timeline on what it would take to bring something back, but
that's okay.
I think we can, in the next several months, have something that we would vet through the chamber and have everyone take a look at before we bring back to council. I think that's a fair next step.
Final comments before we move on?
I just wanted to thank the businesses for coming. It's a really complicated. I thought it was easy when I started looking at this, and then the more I got into what is actually compostable, what is actually commercially available, it became apparent to me it's a lot more complex than I thought. And different jurisdictions can compost things. I recently, Yountville gets one representative on Upper Valley, and I recently became the representative. So I want to look into a little bit what it takes to be commercially compostable and how we might get there if that's a possibility. So I guess that's the long and the short. And the only other thing I want to say is I am really concerned about the cost. I believe in doing the right thing, and maybe I listen to too much CNBC, but I really feel like we're in a really spiraling area of costs right now. Utilities are up 70% since 2020, minimum wage is up, all good things except the utilities. But I'm very cognizant that we have to be a little bit careful about putting a lot more costs on our businesses and, most importantly, the people who come to Yountville. So I was really helpful to hear some of that. So thank you.
I, too, want to express gratitude for all of you showing up today and bringing your thoughts and comments forward. The collective efforts that you've been making for the past years are making a difference. And with encouragement, please continue along those lines. I know that the costs for those businesses that do sell not only to tourists, but to the workers and the people that come through here and need to grab a quick lunch and a beverage, that is a big issue. But trying for the town staff to add a personal member to be the liaison between Upper Valley management. I see firsthand, I run a business in Napa that has a commercial kitchen with about 8 private chefs that all come in and have different schedules, as well as a Montessori school, and all of the use of the garbage and trying to coordinate that. We now have to go through the city of Napa. And it makes it a tangled web that people get so frustrated in working with the city because their messages aren't getting relayed. So sometimes I think it is better to go right to the Upper Valley. But please document those conversations. And if you're not getting the desired actions and correspondence that you want, then it is important that we know that. But trying to get in the middle of it takes it one step away from achieving everybody's goals, I think. And as far as those of you that are using cardboard, I know I have a hanger steak, pommes frites, and mussels from Bouchon last night in the refrigerator waiting for dinner, and I hope that it's holding up. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you all for being here and for your willingness to be a partner. And I think that's what we have to do moving forward, is find ways to partner together and to, I know when I travel, I appreciate when businesses do make efforts to use recyclable materials. I know the visitors that come to town and your guests do that as well. So we just have to find a way to stage that, to encourage it to do more, because I think our visitors and guests appreciate that. And then I also appreciate your concern and your desire to ask the town, as one of the 4 legislative bodies that that works with the Upper Valley Disposal Services that we need to challenge them as well. So thank you for being here, and I think we can, if we work together, we'll find ways to improve what we do in town, and it's something that I think residents and visitors will appreciate. Thank you.
So that wraps up this part, and everyone can leave or you can stay. But our next part, we're going to be talking about what the council is doing at the county level with a climate action plan that incorporates some of this too, in case you're interested. So thanks for coming.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
So you're going to kick off part 2, Brad?
I'm going to hand it over to Aaron Heacock to kick off number 2.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So, as you all know, the town participates in the Regional Climate Action Adaptation Plan. Well,
I don't know if we can hear you through your mic. Maybe you can move it forward. Or, yeah, maybe that one.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
So this is just a quick introduction of the Regional Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. As we all know, the town is a participant in the Regional Climate Action Committee that meets every month. The committee aims to foster collaboration among local governments, stakeholders, relevant agencies to development and implement regional aligned climate action strategies. So the purpose is to facilitate coordinated climate adaptation mitigation strategies across Napa County, enhancing communication and information sharing among local jurisdictions, aligning regional efforts with state climate action mandates, and identifying funding opportunities and collaborative initiatives to address climate resilience. This is a new slide. So as we discussed earlier, that the town does have an adopted climate action plan that was adopted in 2016. It outlines strategic approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and promoting long-term environmental sustainability within the community. And so, yeah, we have that here. And so that has a list of action implementation measures that the town has decided is important. And so essentially the Climate Action Committee at the February 28th meeting presented a memo from Ascent Environmental basically outlining options for the CEQA component of the recap. And that memo outlined, I believe, 6 different options. And reading it, it appears 3 of them are most appropriate for the council to consider. One is an initial study in mitigated NEGDEC, a negative declaration, and this option would cost approximately $90,000 and would take 6 to 9 months. The town's share would be approximately $6,750, and including the Climate Action Committee budget, which is essentially to cover county planning staff time, is just over $14,850. So that would be a total of just over $21,600. And the second option would be to agree with the county's recommended approach, which would be to prepare a programmatic level EIR. And this option would take about a year with an estimated cost of $400,000 and then an additional almost $67,000 for county council support to review the documents. So again, that would be nearly $467,000. And the total share with the staff time would be about $50,000 for the town. The third option would just be deciding not to prepare a CEQA document. And so that would leave the document up to legal challenges. Essentially all it would take would one person who, when the actual draft implementation measures and action items come out, they read them, they go, oh, this potentially could cost my business a lot of money. I'm against this now. This leaves the document open to a legal challenge. And so that's an option. And so that would eliminate the CEQA component. And so again, the town's share of the staff time would be just under $15,000. Oh, that was it.
Yeah, let me just add a few things. Thank you, Aaron, for that concise summary. I think for the public's knowledge, we do have two members of I call it the CCAC. I guess it's the CAC or whatever it's called, the County Climate Action Committee, which is Council Members Tripp and Council Members Reeves. They've been going to a lot of the meetings, so you can share any insights, obviously, from that perspective. I will also say attached to the staff report for this study session are two memos. One memo that was written by Aaron to me that kind of outlines these options. And then the other one is the full memo that was written by, I think it's Brian Bordono, whoever's leading the CAC, which are attached to the staff report, so available to the public. I think there's three things to consider, right, as you look at all these: time, money, and then need. I'll say need, versus want, and, I think that's a vast little spectrum. But, we've kind of outlined time and need. What's interesting, which but for the public, there was a meeting scheduled for last Friday where some of these, they were asking for the jurisdictions to present a position. And that meeting got canceled because of a lack of a quorum. So that meeting will happen now on April 25th or 4th?
April 25th.
April 25th. So truthfully, I wouldn't have felt comfortable moving forward last Friday with a position, because this is the first time the whole council has heard this. But if you all do get specific enough to say, 1, 2, or 3, then Aaron or our members can represent this. I will tell you from my interactions with at least the Up Valley cities, and I think American Canyon too, everyone is just kind of really concerned about the cost. And when you talk about time, you're talking about months, but you're also talking about staff time. And I do feel like this is another thing that the bigger cities don't fully get. I'm glad that Aaron's been to the last 2 meetings, 2 or 3. We were able to get our staff embedded so that we could have this conversation today, because without that, it's very hard to, advise you as policymakers. You're going to the meetings, and it's not simple to sort through this stuff. So this is another challenge, which is why I'm glad we're doing this today. We can kind of, listen to the public and then listen to you, and perhaps go to that April meeting with a position. If not, we can just listen, see how the other jurisdictions approach it, go in with kind of, we're not sure yet. I'm not opposed to that, because that might be the better play, because we are different than the rest of the jurisdictions because we have an adopted climate action plan. We don't have as great a need as the others. But I do also, we all recognize the need to be regional players and participate. So I pose those questions sort of, again, time, money, and need for your consideration, as you sort of vet the 3 options before you.
So I have a question for our town attorney. So these options apply if there's a climate action plan. Now, I don't want to pick an option before I see the plan. It's kind of a chicken and the egg. But if there is a draft list of items that would be included in the plan, it would not need, an EIR or NEGDEC or CEQA. Is that correct? Because I don't know what I'm talking about yet.
Right. You mean, could the Climate Action Committee come up with a list of these are the things that we would want to include in the eventual plan before you go forward? Mm-hmm. I think they could before they say for sure that that's. They have. Okay. Well, I might lead it over to the representative.
We had the same discussion.
Go ahead.
At the Climate Action Committee. How can we approve an action about funding this EIR when we don't know what it looks like that we're going to be researching? And the council there said, well, it often happens that it's concurrent rather than one after the other, and didn't answer the question really about whether or not we want to proceed based on what the RCAP says. So I think it's a big issue for everybody.
And I'm going to be quite frank here, that's really my concern too, because when you have county council, they have a very special accounting procedure called A1. They wrap in everything in the kitchen sink into their costs. So the bottom line, their hourly rate is very high. I would say before, just like you said, you weren't quite satisfied with the county council's reply, looking at their rates on how much that is, I would assume they're going to charge by the hour, not the project, and bringing somebody else in. This is a big deal, I think, and very costly. And I don't really know how to say, I'm going to pick 3 because I don't know what I'm even talking about. So,
well, and I did circulate it. There is a list of fairly specific things they're going to include in the RCAP. So it's reduction of various sources of greenhouse gas emissions. So there is a list, and I did circulate it to Gary and the rest of all of you. And it's also in the memo that Aaron did. There's a section where the consultant who's proposed to do the CEQA talks about the things that are likely to be in the RCAP. And 2 things I like to just say. There are things like reducing greenhouse gas emissions from certain specific sources, landfills being one of the largest ones. Reach and building codes will be another one. It's a regional effort, and I think there will be a fair amount of flexibility built in so that not everybody has to do the same things, because it just isn't practical. They're building huge numbers of homes in American Canyon, so their approach to some of these issues is going to be a little different than ours. So that will be built in. So we do actually have a pretty good idea of what the RCAP would look like. It is a regional effort. I guess my only comment is if we don't participate in the RCAP, it would be hard to say what we would be doing at the CAC, because I think this will be the biggest effort of the CAC. And it was the thing that, in the time that I've been on it, everybody said we really, really need to get done. So I guess I would think long and hard about not participating in this, especially, although I know $35,000 isn't nothing, which would be number 2. And a lot of this money goes to the consultants, though you're right, the county council, they add a lot of extra costs, and so by the time you get to the hourly rate, it is pretty high. But most of that money would go to the council, to the Ascent, who is going to do the actual CEQA analysis. I actually asked the same chicken and egg question that you did, and what we heard from Pam was Pam just said what they said, which is a lot of times it does go concurrently, especially since we have a pretty good idea what's in the RCAP. They spent a huge amount of money, and I can't remember. I believe it was about $500,000 that came through our Representative Thompson got it for us in order to do this extensive greenhouse gas emissions study. I mean, it's extensive in terms of what efforts will produce what results. So a lot of work has been done. So if we were to stop for and I'm just being practical, for the $36,000, hard to know what that would actually mean in terms of our participation. I do believe it's important as a regional to be at the seat of that table. One, because we're learning a huge amount about what's going on and potential issues and potential ways to address climate. But also I think it needs to be a regional effort, even though we're a very small player. So those are just my thoughts, although, of course, it's a council decision. But to not participate in the RCAP would, I think, be kind of saying to people, we're not really going to play. And they probably would let us stay at the table, but that's a big decision for, I know $36,000 is not something to sniff at, but if the rest of the group decides the chicken egg and get past that issue, and we do have some pretty astute people on there in terms of cost, just like what you said, Margie, who will help us look at the cost. So maybe we could get it down some, but eventually we're going to have to reach a decision to participate or not, I guess is sort of what I'm thinking.
Well, maybe one more question for Gary. What would your comment be if you were the council here on number 3? And anyway, then I have one more comment after that. Then I'll let everyone else talk.
Well, I do think you need a CEQA document. So if you're saying number 3 is prepare no CEQA document at all, I do think you need to go through and create one of those, probably a mitigated negative declaration at least, and probably an EIR for the to be safe reasons that your planning and building director mentioned. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I did look at the memo that was prepared and given to the Climate Action Committee discussing these options and making the recommendation. And the CEQA ideas that were in there all made sense to me. So I agreed with all that.
Okay.
Not only lawyer, I just would like to offer, the CEQA I think Aaron sort of said this in a different way. It's required for implementation. So if in essence you're going to implement one of the measures, you're going to want to have CEQA.
Right. I totally agree with that phase, but it's like
right.
the cart before the horse or the chicken before the egg or whatever. That's what I'm struggling with.
Right. So I think, this comes down to like, what do we want to implement, and I do feel like we are different because we don't need to like tier off an EIR because we want to build a bunch of houses, because that's not what's going to happen here. So if there was something specific, which is where I've been struggling to see, like the only thing that's come up is like EV chargers. Like, we should have a regional approach to EV chargers. Okay, well, I agree with that, but does that require CEQA? Maybe. But I also think sometimes when you do a CEQA document, you're actually provoking the challenge. So I did hear a theory that said if you don't do CEQA, then everyone's on their own to implement. You're still participating. You're not participating, but you're kind of getting down to what are we implementing. And once you figure that out, you decide as a jurisdiction, do we need a CEQA document or not? And I think that really depends on all the different things. So I just offer that as kind of a contrary.
Can I ask you a question, Gary? Could the group adopt an RCAP and we be part of that? And wouldn't adopting the RCAP, regardless of what Yountville does, as a group require a CEQA analysis? So that, in other words, it'd be a little tough to piecemeal it and say, well, we didn't really participate in the CEQA, but we're going to sign on to the RCAP. How would that work?
Yes, it depends. It depends in part, which is I think what Brad was alluding to, on when it's implemented and or adopted. So CEQA requires that you undertake that at the earliest stage of undertaking a discretionary project. So when something is in its preliminary, simply planning concept phase and has not been adopted yet, then CEQA, it does not apply yet because you haven't got to the point where you're implementing this thing. So, I mean, if you think about the go into your chicken and egg concept, you think about how a normal planning project works here in town, right? Somebody will show up and they will have plans and a concept, an idea that gets submitted to town. Town will see what the concept is, subdividing, buildings will go in, zone change, things like that. No CEQA has been done yet, but you still have an idea about what is being proposed, right? It's only if the town were to go forward with a discretionary, yes, you get your use permit or your subdivision, that you would then need to have CEQA to accompany that particular action. So if the purpose of what the Climate Action Committee is doing is to give you a broad concept, right, here's a 60,000 foot view of 4 or 5 things that you should think about doing, and then each of the agencies is going to take that and adopt it into their own climate action plan or some other document that will then be used for their particular needs, then you might not have to do CEQA at the Climate Action Committee level, and then it would come back down to each member to do with what they will with it.
So you're saying you could adopt the RCAP as the group. It's not exactly clear to me. I know we're not a right, it's an informal group at this point. We're not an agency or anything. So you're saying you could adopt the RCAP and all of us vote at that meeting, and that's not a CEQA event? Until somebody actually tries to build something or do something that would be impacted by the RCAP?
Well, I'm not sure that the Climate Action Committee would be adopting it under this, because that is an action that's discretionary. You wouldn't have to do, and I think that would very likely trigger CEQA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's also what I'm thinking. Well, first, I would really like to hear, especially from the Up Valley cities, because that's going to affect these numbers. Say if they both go out, that's going to affect this number. If they're all, the other two are in, then these numbers will probably stand. And I did look at the documents, but of course I had more questions and there was no one to ask. So REACH codes are something that I really would want to explore a lot more. The concept of exploring REACH codes, I'm fine with that. But which REACH codes are we really talking about in those details? That's where, the rubber meets the road, as long as we're using a lot of great acronyms here. That's not even an acronym, but whatever it is, colloquialism. Sure. So, yeah. That's what, those are the two things before, and I'm also very concerned that, I really believe in regional groups like this. I think this is where there's a lot of people who can really effectuate change. So I really am always supportive of that. On the other hand, it's, I think it's also intriguing. I mean, if you do it all from a regional approach, fine. But if they're really the goalposts for our individual climate action plans, that's okay too, because that way you won't have to have somebody or two other communities not being involved. They just may not adopt it. So they could be, an overarching agency. And people not showing up, I think you really got to figure out what's going on there. So.
Okay, well, if I can try to summarize and take final comments.
A couple questions. Thank you.
Go ahead, sorry.
One quick question. When Yountville did our climate action plan, did we do any environmental analysis for that? Or? I'll move on as you're looking at that. The other question was, looking at the county report, I guess, if it's that where they're the proposed lead agency, this Regional Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, the RCAP, their project team developed 46 proposed greenhouse gas reduction measures, as Councilmember Tripp mentioned, to reduce emissions from most sectors, including on-road transportation, building energy use, off-road equipment, agriculture, solid waste, water, and wastewater. And so what interests me is, I guess at some point, one, I'm curious, if the county is planning soon to go through a general plan update, what's their time, money, and need going to be in terms of staffing? But we're asked to kind of look at what choice we want to do with environmental review, but what if the conversation was of these 46 proposed reduction measures, if we said the top 20 were more important, would that influence the type of environmental study you would have to do? I mean, like with Yountville, we have our, as a smaller community, but just generally, if you reduce the scope of it, I'm wondering if it would make the process easier as a step to move through and address the top 20 type of reduction measures as like we're going to try to do with our recycle, with our recycle plan, to try to find a way to do it with the most efficient time, money, and needs. So. Yeah. I don't know if that's a conversation that we should have at the Climate Action Committee level. Does the county really? I mean, does it mean when we join the county and they're doing this work? How soon will it get done? And how many of these issues really relate primarily to the county in terms of off-road equipment, agriculture, solid waste that? It's important for us as a county to be, and I think, and I agree with the mayor that regional planning is important. But is it? What are the significant issues we should maybe address first? So,
yeah, let me try to answer some questions based on what I know. I do think your first question, the 2016 CAP was adopted, which led into the general plan. I think when you adopted the general plan, you had a EIR, a CEQA document, which covered what was done in the 2016 CAP. So that's kind of how it worked. I think your other question, which really gets into what I was trying to say, is like what you need CEQA for is implementation. And, there's regional things, there's local things, there's, collaborative things. So it becomes a question of what do we really want to implement. We do have an adopted CAP with what would view as a certified EIR because of the general plan. What's interesting also to me is when you think about what we did, the county's sort of doing the same thing, right? Because they're getting through all the greenhouse gas inventories and starting this as they start their general plan update. And their general plan update, my guess is that'll take at least 2 and maybe 4 years. It's going to be a long process because the counties are hard, and I think they're all kind of bracing for this. So although it is important to be part of regional planning, we'll go back to time, in terms of like how much regional planning, because their general plan is going to become a very contentious process. Whether that's the CAC or the CCAC is a JPA. Gary's going to kind of look at what authorities they have. I don't think they have the authority to adopt a climate action plan for Yountville. Like we would have to adopt that for whatever we view to be, germane to Yountville. Gary's going to research that, but I think this becomes the question of, okay, we're in the room. What does the CCAC actually have the authority to do? I don't know the answer to that. And, I obviously want to hear from you, Councilmember Reeves, but what I was going to suggest, and as you kind of make final comments so we can move along, is we're not ready to decide 1, 2, or 3 right now. We need to go to the meeting. We need to hear the others. I think we're doing, and you say, when do you have the conversation, Councilmember Knight? I think we are having it right now. This is the conversation where everyone is sort of sharing their views. But truthfully, we don't really know what we're looking at yet, because there is the chicken and egg dilemma that you're all mentioning. There's the need versus want, question, which I think we need to do some more homework on. So correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I want to hear you all keep speaking, but I think Aaron will be there.
I'd like to maybe let's hear from the public, and then.
Oh, okay. I thought we already kind of tried to do that, but obviously, yeah. Let's.
No public comment on this item. Anybody like to step up to the mic? Okay, I'll bring it back. All right. Thank you very much. There you go.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah,
yes.
I just wanted to bring it back to our own cap, which stated that, number one, it's much less specific than what the county will be producing. And the greenhouse gas emission study is way more intricate and way more extensive. So one of the items in our own cap says that by 2020, we should have done an additional greenhouse gas analysis. Correct. So here we are, sort of tacking on to what the county has produced. But I have to say that we did bring it back to the council for a vote on whether we wanted to participate in the RCAP in the first place. And we were benefiting from a grant that actually paid for the RCAP. So if the money is the issue, $36,000 is a bargain. Because if we were to do our own greenhouse gas study and compare it to our less stringent cap, I think that we would not be going forward. And so it worries me that we're going to use the cost of the $36,000 as the reason why we're not going to participate. Because there's another clause in our cap that says we will participate regionally because that's the best place to make these changes. So I feel like what has come before has been directing us towards being part of the CAC and towards this new RCAP and eventually, I suppose, the CEQA document. So I just worry that we won't be on board for a relatively small amount of money because we're not sure we're going to use it, but we are.
But there are two things. We don't really know if that's the final because it depends on who else joins in.
Right.
Plus, I thought we had a pretty interesting discussion about, is this fully, deemed a project in terms of CEQA that is really needed. I think we had some interesting other options that, might get us to the point where we're a lot more comfortable, doing that. So that's all I'm saying. I don't think anyone's saying we want out, we don't believe in regionalization. I think there's just some additional information we really need and some more exploration in terms of, what CEQA document at which point of this becoming what I call an official project, because that's when you need the CEQA. Is that correct, Gary? Yeah.
Well, I would really look forward to what Gary is going to be researching and what we find out at the next meeting. And then we need to have another discussion in council because I think it is a big deal. Yeah. And we need to make sure we have all the information we need to make a good decision.
Yeah, I think we can plan to have something in May where there's maybe it is a decision, assuming it's framed that way at the CAC, so we can say A, B, or C, because right now we're sort of, just guessing. But I would just respond by saying a few things. One, to me, it's not about the money. So don't think that I'm saying 35,000 is the issue. I think the other municipalities might be saying that, but I don't think we're saying that. To me, it's way more about the time and the need. And I do think, I haven't followed it too closely, but I think the GHG inventories have already been done. So we're not paying for that. So that's done. We've already participated. Yep. We've benefited from that. So yep. When you say that's part of the cap, you can check that, say we've done that. So this gets into, what I think at least CAPs refer to as implementation measures. You're saying projects. It's sort of the same difference. Like, what are we implementing? And again, 35,000 is not a lot of money, but are we getting anything for that? Because we already got the GHG inventory, so we can already, if we wanted to modify our cap, we could use those numbers and do it on our own, instead of being part of what could be a 2 to 3 year process, which could consume a lot of time and energy, where we could, still be at the table, but we could be doing our own thing. So I do think there's a hybrid sort of solution. So I want you to keep your mind open to okay, maybe it's a combination of these things. But you can hear, at least my sensitivity again is more on the time, and then what are we really getting for our time and money?
But I think also a question that we should wrestle with is that once the RCAP is produced, adopted, whatever is done with it, then it turns less of a climate action committee about education and more about implementation. And at that point, it will really be about staff time.
Which is all part of the equation.
Right.
But again, I want to emphasize the RCAP will be flexible, because just as Eric pointed out, there's a lot of stuff that Yountville will have nothing, we don't have any impact on, like the agricultural measures. And my understanding of the RCAP is that we'll have that flexibility, that there will be a menu, because not everything's going to be applicable to everybody. But I just want to ask you, Brad, if we say we're not going to participate in the environmental review for whatever reason, although I do want to reiterate that Gary did say the RCAP itself and adopting it likely does require a CEQA analysis. So they're going to have to do a CEQA analysis if they adopt an RCAP. The whole point of the CAC is to have an RCAP, a regional plan. So if we don't participate in paying for the environmental review of the RCAP and they go ahead without us, are we then saying we won't sign on to an RCAP? Or are we just saying you go ahead and do it and we'll decide when you get there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd have to listen to it. No, I mean, I think, as you point out.
What are we saying? I don't know.
Well, what I'm saying is what are we implementing, and then is the 35,000 with their EIR, does that EV charging stations?
They have to pay that. Gary said that. That's the price of entry to an RCAP. So if we don't want to pay, we're saying don't do the RCAP, or we're not going to participate.
I'm probably steering into
anyway, I'll stop.
Too far of your lane, but what we're paying for is an EIR that supports the implementation measures of the RCAP. Okay, that's what they're paying for. So the RCAP's the RCAP. Like, we can take it and we can implement it at the local level and pay for it on our own, or we can benefit from the regional effort.
Once it's adopted, though, it requires CEQA. Okay, that's all I'm saying. So they're going to adopt it. You're right. It could live out there as a paper, a white paper, requiring no CEQA analysis. But we will be at the table when they vote to adopt it, presumably. So once they adopt it, they got to do CEQA. So what is our role then if we've said, no, we don't want to pay for CEQA? We don't vote to adopt it, or
no? I don't think you're adopting. Well, okay, this is the legal nuances of it. Yeah, we have to adopt it at the local level. So yeah, we could adopt it. Say,
So I just want to ask Aaron. So you're saying that the Climate Action Committee, as a joint powers, won't adopt it? And
that's a question for Gary, but I do know that each jurisdiction will have to adopt.
Well, have to approve us voting for it.
Or we will have to adopt it.
No.
Okay, and where does that come from, Aaron?
That was in the memos from Ascent Environmental.
Thank you. Okay.
It's much like the JPA for Upper Valley. We make the board delegates the decision for voting to whoever our representative is. But then once that's done, like the big example we had was Amendment 5 for the waste management contract, each municipality had to ratify it, if that's the right word, Gary.
So they're ratifying the vote of their member. Okay, so
Of the entire, of that document, not that, the member was right or wrong.
Okay.
So it's just a bit of a
apologize. I don't mean to get down in the weeds, but I'm just trying to think through what this would look like if we don't participate. That's
It's
all.
just a two-step process.
So Mayor, just had a quick comment. So I support us being involved in a regional action plan. And I thought part of our discussion today was a complicated discussion really of what level of environmental review do we want to support. And I don't necessarily have a problem with us being involved in supporting the program EIR. The question is, after a few years of being involved in county committees and all that, and knowing they're going into a general plan update for the county, I want us to encourage something that gets something that we can work with sooner than later, because it could be 8 years if they're involved in other planning and their staff is overwhelmed. So let's encourage a discussion saying we're for this RCAP, but if we should narrow the scope of it so it gets done sooner and is more practical, then let's encourage that, or encourage that conversation than this just open-ended study of everything in the county that will just be bogged down years from now. And, they'll be working on it long after I'm on this council. Probably. So, anyway,
appreciate that. Let me add one wrinkle to that thought, just to help you kind of
get really confused.
No, this is actually a very sort of practical thing. Like Calistoga bought the fairgrounds, right? They're struggling with how they're going to deal with CEQA review. They may really benefit from this because they can all of a sudden, involve this discussion and perhaps get some of the analysis done that paves the way for them. With the Commons next door, we're not doing that. Like, we're going to do our own CEQA document. We're going forward. We don't need anything from the county to entitle the Commons. Like, we're on a path to do that our own. So that's a little wrinkle to think, like, why Calistoga might support it and why we might not. Because there are, in some cases with these regional things, benefits to development. And this is where, a lot of times you see builders and other developers try to sort of tear off of a regional plan. So that's the other thing I just want you to think about. I mean, it's easy to say, and I clearly believe we need to be involved in regional issues. It's just to what degree. And I think those are the little things that because you can encourage all you want, but we don't have much influence over this process. The county is going to go down their path. We're just going to be like along for the ride. And if I have to send Aaron to a monthly meeting for the next 8 years, I don't know if Aaron will be around for 8 years. These things are drains on time and staff. So that's all I'm trying to, share with you. And I think the Calistoga, the fairgrounds versus the Commons is a good example. There's probably others in American Canyon and other areas where they're expanding a lot more that have more of a need for this type of document because they're looking at growth, and we're really managing our growth internally.
So can you wrap up our discussion so we can move on to tree? We've only
So we're going to listen on the next meeting, and then we'll come back in May and hopefully have a decision point that you can vote on.
Okay, thank you. All right, who's going to do the tree ordinance discussion? Aaron.
I'll do it.
All
right, great.
Okay, well, we got Tony in the background, but we'll let Aaron.
Okay, I'll just briefly kind of introduce it. So this is just an introduction to the tree ordinance and describing what the goals town is, to foster a vibrant and healthy mixed species urban forest. And it goes on, and it says, for these reasons, the town has adopted standards and policies to preserve and manage its urban forest. So, little background. I went back and watched several council meetings on the topic, and so in July 2023, essentially the council held a study session to talk about the tree ordinance and provided direction to update the ordinance to clarify the process and make it easier to understand. Essentially, clarifying the do's and don'ts. The council directed to have a strong introduction and purpose statement. There was also just a lot of discussion about the pyrophyte issue that was interesting. Ultimately, and then to hire a town arborist, and then for a neighbor notification process. Ultimately, it was decided that it would be a two-step process, and that we would make the small changes first, that being hiring the town arborist and amending the ordinance to include a neighbor notification requirement. The second part of that would be a comprehensive ordinance revision that would follow in the future. So then in October 2023, the first step came along, and that was the intro and first reading of the code amendments to hire and bring on a town arborist, and also to implement the neighbor notification process. At that meeting, the council provided further direction that the arborist should review ordinances adopted in other jurisdictions to see what might work for Yountville, and to bring those back and share that with the council. Important items to consider in the update was described a comprehensive list of definitions, strong introduction and purpose statements, clarity on the process, and then also, emergency versus non-emergency removals, clarifying that, what trees can and can't be removed, breast height, those types of things. And so now we are here before you to confirm direction on proceeding with the tree ordinance, and to ask that you provide direction on whether the code changes should be brought back in chunks, whether we should draft an introduction, purpose statement, definitions, those types of things, bring that back in one piece, or whether we should bring back a complete red line strikeout version all at one time for the council to consider, and then also to provide any additional guidance on priorities or things you would like to see in the ordinance.
Okay. I'm going to be watching the clock here. But again, we're in a study session. Any council thoughts before I go to public comment?
I will say Tony Arborist is here if you would like him to.
Yeah, and I'll add just to conversations I've had, and this is sort of resetting the conversation we started under Irene, and we had. And I'm grateful to have Aaron here, listen to it all, and now I said, hey, we need to get this done. But I do think the question of steps is an important question, and how you want it coming back, without getting Tony to go too far into it. I know he has a vision for what I'll call a model ordinance, which I do think he draws from his experience here, but his experience in other communities. If you want, he could take 5 minutes to try to kind of share that with you. But
I'll give him 3.
3 minutes. Okay. You got.
I got another meeting to run. Sorry, guys.
I think it's important to hear from him, but I think the process is really what we're asking you. Do you want us to bring this back to you in chunks, or do you want us to kind of bring back the fully baked ordinance based on what you hear from Tony in 3 minutes?
Okay. Tony in 3 minutes. Come up to the mic, please. Let's let him get his 3 minutes, and we'll go to public.
How about 5 minutes?
No, 3.
Now, is this on?
Yes, it's on.
Okay. I did have quite a few things to say, but just first, in general, in my line of work, I read about every week 2 or 3 ordinances from different municipalities, whether they be cities or counties. So I have a whole breadth of information about different ordinances. And I was going to read a couple to you, but I won't waste that time for it. One was from Calistoga, one was from Sausalito, and they're quite different. But I think it's very important that we start with a good introduction to the ordinance, which is mostly intent and purpose of the tree ordinance. And if we get those things right, then from there the whole ordinance kind of follows. And I think that's sort of an important step. I know in going over the old ordinance, there's a whole lot of things there that, just to use an expression, is not to professional standards. I mean, there's some mistakes and there's some things that shouldn't be said. One of them is about pyrophytes. Remember that little conversation? Just remember, pyrophytes are plants that love fire, that they depend on fire, okay? So it's not eucalyptus, it's not anything else that might burn in a fire, okay? So having said that, I just think that it's important to get a good step going in that direction. I feel like I could write the whole ordinance and give it to you, but I don't think that you want just my viewpoint. It's got to come from other people, council members, but also from the citizens of the town too, to give ideas as to what they think is important with that ordinance. And to do that, I think we should work first on the intent and purpose of the whole ordinance. Get that right, and then from there, we'll start working off the little chunks afterwards that we can update the existing ordinance and make it much better. Okay? So that having said, right. So quickly.
Yeah, I think that's great, because I do think...
Out the window.
Yeah. Oh, you want to talk about a tree?
Yes.
Go ahead.
That's a beautiful Pacific dogwood. And what you're looking at are not flowers. Those are leaves that have adapted to being part of a fluorescence, but they're not flowers. The flower is inside the little green thing that you see there. So those white petals are also photosynthesizing and giving us the oxygen that we breathe, which is one of the more important benefits that trees give to us. And the rain, swallowed up by the leaves and the root system, holds it together so we don't have erosion. Okay, sorry.
All right. All right, thanks. Now I will go and to the public. Public comment, please. Thank you, Tony.
Alan Tenscher. I'm generally satisfied with the direction of this particular item, but what I'm curious about, and we heard it with respect to having ordinances and having them being followed. I was on the bike path behind Hopper Creek yesterday, and I saw some pretty significant tree work being done. And my question is simply, does the town know that was going on? And that's where my question resides.
It always starts with, is it private or public property?
Well, the tree originated right at the base of the creek. And so it was within 100 feet of Three Weirs Park to the southeast.
Mr. Ferns.
I was not here yesterday, but I'm going to say yes, we do know that was happening, but I will follow up on it to ensure that it was being done appropriately.
Yeah, when you're in the creek bed, as you know, it's a different,
fishing
different
game
process. And
Right out of the creek bed, and things were falling, into the drop zone that exists there. But I'm just curious.
yeah, we'll follow up with you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think turning to the council, I mean, I know we're trying to get done here in the next, 5-10 minutes. And I think based on what Tony just said, obviously, I feel like you were all nodding in terms of, hey, let's come back with, and I think, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, it's just a couple months to do the intention and kind of do the first step that you were suggesting. Is that
Easily, yeah.
a couple months? Okay. So in the next 3 months, if everyone's nodding. I think the other thing I know I've heard from some people, and this gets into public trees versus private trees, right? Which are two different things. How do we manage our urban forest, and then how do we work with people that have issues, whether they have to take down trees or trim trees and so forth. So I know that is part of it, and I do know that I have heard from some of you that on the private side, it's a challenge. It's onerous. Like, how do we make it easier for people to maintain trees or deal with safety issues with their homes? Because, it might be a foundation, it might be a tree that, is dangerous for some reason. And I do think we've talked about those things. So whatever we bring back, I do think of public and private separately, and then we'll start to get into, the weeds, pun intended, after we have the intent. And I think that's a good suggestion, because it is fascinating for me to listen to you, Tony. I've told you this. I listen to it all, and it's really interesting. It's a lot, and I think it's back to plastics. We've covered a lot today between plastics, climate action plan, and now trees. And really, this is back to being a reset. So if there's anything specific as you kind of make around, please say it now, and we'll do our best. But I think this feels like a good process to me.
I have a question. The idea of the introduction and the purpose of the ordinance, will that be something that you're going to synthesize through your experience and then bring it here? Or are you planning to workshop that? Or what's the process?
basically to bring in suggestions, from my experience, because there's a lot of different ways we can go with it, and that's kind of where I need help, because I don't want to be the one that decides which way it goes. But yeah, that would be a process of sorts. Okay.
I think to be specific, she's probably asking, do you want to do a study session like this? Do you want to do a workshop that's more of a public meeting? Or do you want to come back to the council in a regular meeting? There's sort of probably 3 ways to do that.
If I had my druthers, I would like to have it as an ad hoc committee of sorts who are people interested in trees and talk it over with them before coming back with it. But I think that we can do it the latter way, which is to bring it back to council and then start working it over and finding out, what the final issue is going to be like. I think that would be preferable.
Okay. I like that idea myself, just to bring it back and we'll kind of work through it together. I think we like to do that.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments?
I agree. Having intentions set forth first makes sense before we dive into the body of the material. And quick question regarding private or public trees. Does the notification of neighbors within that 300-foot parameter rule apply to both?
No, only to private trees. But we do try to notify them. It depends on the situation.
It applies only to private trees?
Correct.
Okay, because I had like a 60-foot acacia cut in my backyard, and cars couldn't move because the trees, the trucks, the chippers just came in force by surprise one morning. So
whose tree was it? The
we
park's?
can pick it up. No, just somebody's backyard.
Oh, somebody's backyard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
we don't control the parks. That's the state.
Darn parks.
Yeah.
State mobile home park law. Sorry.
Yeah, no notification.
Yeah, sorry. We talked about that extensively with an oak tree. Eric, thoughts?
Just quickly,
thanks, Tony.
I liked very much what I heard from you. So let's move forward. I think we need a better urban forest ordinance, and maybe it's starting with and I like the fact that you're talking about. Let's talk about the introduction. Let's get a good introduction to what we want, and then everything else will flow. But maybe at some point, a workshop like this is the best way to just invite people that want to be here for this issue before a council meeting. As you're working on a draft document that really takes in the best practices from other communities. So, and for communities like Yountville. So, thank you.
Sure.
All right. So, with that, does staff have enough direction? So, I think, whether it's a workshop or comes back to the council depends on when it's all done and when we have more workshops kind of scheduled. So, we'll just do it that way. So, now I'd like to get a motion in a second that we adjourn our study session today to our regular meeting scheduled at 3 p.m. Motion?
Also move that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion. That's okay. I like the fast action. Motion from Tripp and second by Reeves. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. See everybody at 3 o'clock. I wanted to give you a break. So that's why I rushed.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.